What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to an all-new episode of TAETRO Talks. Thank you for joining me on this fine Tuesday. If you don't know, we're live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. PST, 1 p.m. EST. You all international folks can figure out whatever time zone that is around the world. But yeah, we're here every Tuesday for this show. It's a talk show. So sometimes we talk to artists, people in the music industry. Sometimes we talk to the community and we do call-in shows. Today we have a really great guest, which I will talk about in a moment. But thank you all for tuning in. As I said, I see some folks already up here in chat. Thank you all for being early and hanging out today. We've got Nova, Savannah with the new membership emotes. That's what I like to see. Thank you, Savannah, for joining the channel. Hey, my mom's in the chat. What do you know about that? Jeremiah, what's going on? Kalana, Suzuki, Lakshit, what's up? Manram says, hi, Nick. What's up? Nice to see you. Mr. Jules, hello. MC Fender says, hey, TAETRO, just bought an MPK Mini because of many of your videos. That's amazing. Congratulations. Starting on your music making journey. Paul, what's up? Nice to see you. Not Grauman. Nice to see you as well. I'm doing great today. Thank you for asking. David Aditya, what's up? Nice to see you all. Mo Bellhouse, what's going on? Amazing show every morning. Keep it up. Thank you. I appreciate that. Next Level Gamer. Are you really a Next Level Gamer? That is the question. If you want to help out this show and you do enjoy this show and you think it's a great show, we would love to get more eyes and more ears on this show. So while you're watching along, if you've got Instagram or if you've got Twitter or if you've got whatever, just take a picture of the show, whatever you're watching on. If you're watching on your phone, watch it on your laptop, and tag me, tag our guest today, link to the show so more people can watch. I think we have a lot of really valuable conversations on this show with artists, with people from the industry, that a lot of young music producers and even some like pros could probably take some advice from some of the folks we have on this show. So I think it's a good resource. And if you think so too, and you think more people should watch and listen, share it, help us out, and let everybody know about the show. Real quick, this show is brought to you by 343 Labs, which is an electronic music school based in New York, Berlin, and online. Mostly online these days, of course, as we're all in lockdown. And the online classes are taught by some of the best instructors in electronic music production in that world. Like they're touring artists, still active, Beatport charting producers, Ableton-Certified trainers, like some of the best people you can learn from. They're not just anybody, you know, on the internet. They're not just some like YouTuber like TAETRO or something like that. They're like actually, you know, pro musicians in the world. So if you want to learn from people like that, that's cool. If you are not sure if you want to take a class or anything yet, though, we are live every single day on 343 TV. Monday through Saturday with a monthly show on Sundays. We've got Ableton-Certified trainers hosting those shows. We've got Selway's Techno Saturdays. Abe Duque does electronic music production news on Fridays. Music Theory for music producers on Thursdays. I think that's a really great resource. Also, Electronic Music Production Essentials on Wednesday. That's tomorrow's show. Claire Marie Lim, aka Daltrick, on Mondays. She does Ableton Live tips and tricks, if I can talk this morning. But yeah, that is over on youtube.com/343labs, where you can watch this show live and you can watch all the other shows throughout the week. But I feel like I've talked enough. Oh, one more housekeeping thing. I'm live right now, right? We're doing our talk show. I'll be live later this evening doing a show called Tell Me What to Sample. So if you want to show up to that stream, give me funny things to sample, not sampling music, just like sampling objects, random things in my room. If you send me a meme, I might sample a meme. Funny things like that. That's going live at 7 p.m. PST. We're going to hang out on stream and have a good time. But like I said, without further ado, we've got a really talented guest today. I just checked on Spotify. His top track has 12 million plays, which is absolutely insane. Released an EP in December. Artist named Rezident, young up-and-coming electronic music producer. Real quick, let's listen to a clip, and then we will get into the interview with Rezident. So check it out. Rezident, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on with us today.
Thank you for the introduction.
Hey, I'm happy to have you. I'm stoked to talk a little bit more and find out about your story. We all just listened to a little bit of a clip from your recent EP. That's one of my favorite tracks, Artifacts. Another one of my favorite tracks was definitely In Veins as well. Um,
Thank you.
I want to get into like your whole process of making music and releasing an EP during a pandemic, your skyrocketing Spotify numbers. I want to get into all that. But first, I guess I start all these interviews with asking the artist, like, when people ask you what you do, to define what you do, what's your introduction? How do you tell people what it is you actually do?
Um, yeah, I mean, usually I say if they ask about music, I say it's something like deep house
Yeah,
because it's so easy to get into a war of subgenres and
exactly.
everyone starts hating each other. So usually I just say it's deep house.
Nice. Does that ever influence your music making, like trying to fit into the box of a genre or something like that?
No, not really. I mean, I think the one thing that does influence you is, of course, if you see that one track does better than others, then you kind of people are telling you, "Hey, make another track that's like this one." I
Right.
mean, some people are telling it, so I found that to be much more of a limit than staying in the borders of deep house.
Sure. Well, hey, before we get into all that deep stuff, let's talk a little bit about like your artist origin story. Like, how did you get into making electronic music? Like, what were your first steps? Like, were you into like more traditional music? Like, did you play in a band or something, or play guitar or piano? Like, how did you get into music in general?
I used to play piano when I was younger, when I was about 6 years old, till 8.
You lasted two
Um,
whole years.
yeah, lasted 2 whole years. And that was that really. And eventually I was like hanging out on my PC way too much when I was young, like basically gaming. And eventually I downloaded FL Studio when I was 11 or 12, and it was like just it was horrible, but it was like the first introduction. And then I think when I was 15 or 16 I decided to give it a try, and I was like watching tutorials almost every day and doing a little bit of something every day.
Sure. Did you stick with FL Studio that whole time?
No, when the whole dubstep thing came, I
Yeah.
switched to Ableton because of the macros and because Skrillex was using it. So,
Of course. I was just gonna ask, like, who were you inspired by at that young age during those dubstep
uh,
days?
I mean, I think mostly Deadmau5,
Yeah,
I guess, because it's the most sort of progressive housey thing,
yeah.
which I'm still somehow doing more or less. Yeah,
That was such a crazy moment in time when like Dead Mouse is blowing up and then Skrillex was happening. Like, what a time to
yeah,
come up.
yeah.
Lots
I
of
mean, they're all a
sources for
bit older.
inspiration.
They're all a bit older now,
Mm-hmm.
so they already made their stuff when, like, in 2012 or so. It feels
Yeah.
like it was a week ago, but it's actually already been like 10 years. I don't know.
Yeah. About. Um, was your initial process when you were young and you're just starting out, were you trying to really emulate the sound like of Dead Mouse or of Skrillex or something? Is that kind of how you learned?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I thought, well, if we even use the same software, then it has to be possible to recreate it.
Yes.
um
Yeah. I feel
and there
that
were a
way all
lot.
the time when I'm talking to beginners. I'm like, if you can use the exact same tools that these people are using, then you don't have to buy gear. Like you already have the DAW and
Yeah,
you have the computer.
exactly. And but it didn't quite work, even though there were so many how to sound like Skrillex or Deadmau5 tutorials.
Totally.
It didn't quite work.
You think it didn't work because you were trying to do somebody else's sound? You know what I mean? Because now you've like fully found your sound. I would say. Like I listen to it and I hear like the roots of that early like electronic music, like progressive house kind of stuff. But it does fully sound like you. It doesn't sound like an emulation of something else.
That's cool. Thank you. Um,
I
I
wonder.
think,
Go ahead.
yeah. No, I think like the problem with these tutorials is, sometimes you can get it to a shortcut if you use a preset or like a special setting on a synth, but that's just like a tiny part of the whole thing. So,
Sure.
you know,
I think it's interesting the way you said, like, okay, it wasn't working when you were trying to do that sort of emulation, but you were learning. What was the next step in kind of finding your sound and making yourself distinct from those artists that you loved?
I think at some point, yeah, I don't know. I realized that I wasn't that good at remaking other people's stuff, and I kind of I tried looking at these tutorials for to learn stuff, but eventually I just wanted to do what I want. It also wasn't meant to be something like commercial or a job. I was just trying to have fun.
Sure.
So um, yeah, developed over the last years.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to like replicate exactly something, but sure, sometimes there is a cool sound in some track, and then you try to replicate it, and you don't quite end up there, but you still make something cool that's different and kind of sounds like you.
Yeah. And I wonder, I talked to a lot of artists. I feel like I've talked to a disproportionate amount of artists that are from Germany. And 343 Labs, we've got the school in Berlin. I'm wondering, like, if being from Germany, coming up in Germany, like, any influence there with just like growing up in basically the home of electronic music, like all this stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't know if I would have ended up in that deep house thing if it wasn't for, being here in Germany and surrounded by kind of that type of music. Because I feel like even though there are different genres here and subgenres, a lot of them still are kind of the same thing. The only difference is maybe deep house is a bit like 120 BPM, then down tempo is 1.5 BPM, and like techno is a bit faster, but essentially it's kind of the same vibe.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, I feel like, and yeah, it's really cool to be surrounded by uh, that type of music.
Can you define that vibe? Can you like just kind of paint us a picture? Like, what is that vibe? Like when you hear all those different genres and that different electronic music, but you know that it comes from the homeland, it comes from Germany. You know what I mean? Like, what is that ethos?
I guess if it was a picture, I would have been painting pictures, but
Sure.
it's I don't know, hard to describe. But um, I mean, all type of music is cool. I think there's also a lot of really cool stuff in the US. And didn't like a
Yeah.
lot of house come from like Chicago or something?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Of course.
so it all moves around all the time. So
It does.
I wouldn't say it's strictly German or anything, but it's true. Feel like most people in Germany are, especially like in Berlin, are like techno people. Like
Yeah.
everyone is a DJ here, actually.
That's what it seems like. I mean, I've never been to Berlin, but we're connected through the school and stuff, and it definitely seems like it's just embedded in the culture there, which I think is really cool. Um, you're pretty young for like doing what you do and like the releases and kind of like the spotlight on you. Have you even had a chance to tour internationally or like come to the US and tour at all yet? Because like you've got this EP out, but it came out like during pandemic. So like I'm wondering like what's that life been like?
Yeah, first and foremost, I feel like someone who makes music, so I'm super happy that I can do that exactly, the same way with or without the pandemic,
Sure.
because it's not, many people can't do their job or their hobby because of the pandemic. And for me, I can just, focus even more on what I want to do.
Totally.
But yeah, it's true. I mean, I was hoping to start playing shows maybe this year or next. I mean, or last year or this year. We will see how it goes. But even without playing shows, I'm still really happy that I can just make music at home.
Absolutely. And since you are like, are you strictly working at home in a home studio? Are you going to a studio at all to work on these tracks, or is it all kind of homegrown?
It's all at home. I remember when I was studying at college, we had access to this studio,
Mm-hmm.
and the first semester I used to go there all the time and do studio stuff. And eventually, it just became a bit tedious to set everything up once you get there. It's
Yeah,
like 15, 20 minutes then at least. And then, again, 15, 20 minutes when you want to go. You can't take really long breaks because someone else might want to go in. and at any time anyone could just walk in and like
It's
you know
so
sometimes.
inconvenient.
Yeah, so I do everything. I mean I enjoy doing everything at home, and I have headphones, and I feel like I've learned quite a bit over the course of the last year when it comes to mixing. So
Yeah,
sure, a proper studio would be great, and I guess that would be the goal, having like a separate acoustically treated room. That would be
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah. Um, do you want to talk us through like what is your home studio setup? Is it super minimal, basic, or like you got a good amount of gear?
Um, I think like the most important piece of gear is my laptop.
Mhm.
I mean, everything is on there, and since I've been moving quite a lot recently, it's just like, it just has to be the way that the laptop is the studio, and
Yeah,
it's so convenient. If I'm anywhere and someone tells me, "Hey, can you re-export that without that part?" and I don't even have to have a like second hard drive or any hardware gear, just it's so convenient. So the laptop is the studio, and at home I have the Ableton Push and like a second screen. I also have a couple synths, but I haven't brought them up to Berlin yet.
you want to shout out those synths because the people in the chat, of course, will want to know what are the synths.
Uh, I just bought some of the Behringer synths.
Nice,
Yeah.
cool.
Um,
You use them
I
on
don't
the
really.
record at all, or are you
Yeah,
still kind of
the behind the scenes one on Anjuna Deep.
nice, awesome?
Yeah, that one used the Model D and the Neutron from Behringer.
Very cool. Would you consider
Do you have
yourself?
do you have
I don't have
do you
hard.
have the Behringer?
I do not have like a lot of hardware since I'm like a crazy person. I'm like super in the box. Like I have a few. Like I have like a micro freak and a couple other small pieces, but I'm super weird about hardware. It's a world that I'll get into, eventually. But I feel like once I feed that part of my brain, I'll I'll go deep and I'll want to buy too many synths. You know what I mean? It could be addicting.
Yeah.
But the way you just described your setup and stuff, you seem to me as though you're a bit of a minimalist. Like you don't really care about
Um,
gear, it seems.
I mean, it's everything is complicated enough as it is, and bringing in external gear just makes it a ton more complicated because you have MIDI tracks, then you have audio recordings, then you have different takes, and then you need to have that gear running to replicate a sound, and even then you probably can't replicate it exactly.
Totally.
If you need to change something, so it absolutely can be worth it. But um,
Yeah.
it's not it tends to make things more difficult. I feel like it gives you that little extra something, but
Yeah. But in terms of the process and
yeah, the
like actually
process.
making the music, like it can
And
trip you up.
since I grew up with digital stuff, that's what I know. So the analog stuff is actually something that's new for me. Whereas I totally understand if people who grew up with analog stuff don't like digital
Right.
stuff because it's a new workflow. But if you're used to it, then it's actually kind of uh, yeah, it's great. I
Yeah.
wouldn't complain.
Yeah,
I love that everything's digital.
that's totally the world I come from too. It's like I grew up on digital just using my laptop. And then I talked to a lot of like the elder generation, who came up on synths and they still love the synths. It's like, of course, because when we move on to the next thing, and like Ableton and a laptop is like the old school thing, and like whatever is new in 2050,
Probably like the iPad is the new thing.
yeah, or like whatever like crazy futuristic version of that it will be. It'll be like in our glasses or something like that.
Yeah.
They'll be like, oh, look at those old timers using Ableton and a laptop. You know what I mean? But speaking of Ableton, do you want to talk us through like your Ableton workflow and like track creation? Like, how does it start? You work in session view, arrangement view, like what's happening? What's your workflow?
Um, it has, it has changed quite a bit over the course of the last years. Not necessarily because it's better or worse now, but because, sometimes things get boring, and then, you try new stuff. I do get that question sometimes, but in the end, it doesn't matter at all what you start with. I think I've heard like one guy was saying that the most important thing is to have one single element that makes the track worth producing. So it doesn't matter how you come up with it or how you get there, but just having one random thing that is the essence of the track.
Sure.
Getting there is really important, and you can get there however you want. Basically, it's always nice to try different things to stay inspired and uh, not get into a routine. But in the end, I like to work a lot in the session view and then eventually go back into the arrangement view. I
Yeah.
think many people do that.
Would you say you work kind of fast on tracks? Like, is it in a single session that you're going from session view to arrangement, or is it like multiple sessions of kind of going back and forth, building the ideas and then building the arrangement?
I'd say the creative span is quite short, maybe like a couple hours
Oh
max.
wow.
So usually like the whole track gets done in that time period. And if it doesn't, then you're just building up some cool parts, and then later when you're being creative, you're switching it up and making the whole track in a couple hours, I would say. And
Yeah.
then of course, after that, that's why I guess everyone has so many demos, is because
Sure.
then taking that sort of raw thing that's basically arranged and everything but not done yet, and bringing it to the next level takes so much time. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Before we get into like that next step, like what do you think? What are some of the main strategies or things that you learned that help you get to the level where you're working on a track and doing it in like a couple hours in the ideal situation? Like what contributes to that kind of fast workflow?
um I mean, getting to know your gear is important. And yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of doing it not once but
Millions
quite a
of
lot.
times. Yeah. Totally. Do you think that there's something about working fast and not letting yourself like overthink and like kind of getting into a flow? So like you're in 2 hours and like boom, like that's it. You're not spending like weeks tweaking like a single sound or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess it's kind of like drawing too, do you know like those Bob Ross
Yeah,
videos?
totally.
And he just like brushes like a little bit and it's like a tree. And sure,
Yep.
he might perfect it later on, but it's because I think because everything depends on each other. If you get lost in making one detail, you will lose the bigger picture. So you kind of have to be aware that you're putting out things there that aren't perfect, but you kind of, like a rough estimate. It's a rough estimate of what it's gonna be, and this way you can keep everything in balance.
Right.
Because if you focus on one element, you will lose the bigger picture of the track.
Absolutely. And then that important part that you mentioned, okay, like the track is arranged and it's kind of like raw and almost ready to go, but it's got to go through those finishing steps. Do you want to describe for the audience, like, what are those finishing steps? Are you working with mixing and mastering engineers, or are you now switching hats from composer to mix and master? Like what's that workflow for you for actually finishing?
Personally, I mix my stuff myself, but I do get it mastered because it just, why wouldn't I? It's not
Right.
even expensive or anything, but it just makes so much sense to at least get it mastered. Ideally, of course, you would also send it over to a mixing engineer, but um, it always depends on the track and what you're doing. I would say what really matters is having a clean session with nice, naming, nice routing, like track routing, so you know what's going on. Some people export everything to audio. I don't do that, but I think the first step is really getting rid of everything you don't need, and trying to not look at the screen but just focus on what matters for the track and what doesn't. And usually you get a track done not by adding more stuff but by refining what's already there, I would say.
Yeah. Tell me about that. Like, are you full on taking elements out? Like maybe I put too much FX over here. Maybe this counter melody doesn't need to be here. Or are you doing things like I could do a little bit better EQ here. I could do a better filter here. Like what kind of things are you refining or taking out of the track when you get to that stage?
I think what I'm trying to do right now is kind of really listen to it, and also try to pay attention to the little things like dynamics and how one certain little element on one track might influence something else on another track. Sometimes the melody kind of melody goes in between tracks because one track plays like a little note and the other plays the rest of the melody. So having all of that together and not just focusing like soloing one track, but yeah, treating the whole thing as one is important, I would say, because oftentimes if you solo one thing, they don't sound quite good, but that's normal.
Yeah.
The whole mix has to sound good,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And I know you touched on like working from home, mixing in headphones. Like, any tips for the young producers out there who are trying to do some similar stuff and are all they have is, their headphones and their laptop. Like, what tips can you give them for like mixing their work and trying to get it to sound as professional as possible?
Well, I would say if you're gonna buy, at least what I've read and everything like that, is if you're gonna buy studio monitors, if you're gonna buy like expensive ones, you need at least to pay the same amount into room treatment. And if you're not gonna do that, then it's kind of pointless. So, just getting expensive studio monitors is just one thing. And, as young people, oftentimes cannot treat their room or
Right.
even are staying in the same room over longer than like half a year. I think it makes a lot of sense to just use headphones and you get quite a lot of advantages because you know how they sound and you can bring them with you. Um, Other than that, listening to reference mixes and not just tracks you like, but tracks that you also think are mixed well is really nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, using a spectrum analyzer is great. I mean, there are a lot of free analyzers, and if you see that your kick is like 5 dB too loud, then you know that your mix is bad.
Yeah.
Of course, if your spectrum is looking right, it doesn't mean your mix is great, but you can definitely find mistakes in the on the visualizer as
Yeah.
well.
I know you mentioned going to school, going to college. Did you study music production, or were you studying something else?
The course is called audiovisual media.
Interesting.
Um, Sorry?
That's interesting. Tell me about that. Like, how does
Yeah.
that play into like everything that you do, or does it?
So yeah, it was a really cool time. I think mostly it really just was a really cool time with a lot of people I met who were, inspiring, and we were all doing media stuff. And of course, that was nice to go home and know, hey, there are a lot of people who are also doing media stuff. I'm not like this random dude.
Yeah.
So it was great. We learned about basic, you know, video, photo. We even had like a little bit of physics and coding and stuff like that. And eventually I focused on the audio aspect. So I was in a couple like studios recording bands and yeah.
Nice.
But
Were you able to take stuff and apply it to the stuff you're doing now? Like was it a formative experience, or was it kind of
yeah, I think mostly when it comes to recording people, I don't record people often, but um, when you're talking with a singer or someone who plays an instrument, again, I don't do that often, but you kind of learn how to interact with them, which
yeah,
is super important. So I would say, that routine is really nice to having experienced that from a sort of traditional point of view.
absolutely. I think some folks in the chat are wondering about the transition point, because you talked about, being a young kid, like being into Dead Mouse, Skrillex, whatever, and then coming into your own sound and learning all this stuff about like making your own music, mixing your own music, getting good. Like, what was the transition point to, it being just for fun, it being just a hobby, to like now it's ending up being like a career? Like, what was that transition point, and what actually propelled you from hobby to profession?
Well, it definitely wasn't like a day or so. It was
Right.
I still feel like I'm in that phase, because there's so much I really want to do, and there's so many things I want to finish, and I know that if it was in 2 years or so, I would be able to do it better than I can do it right now.
Of course.
Um, at the same time, I also know if I would do it in 2 years, it would be just a different thing. So I guess it doesn't. It's not a thing.
Like, there's
It
not a
just
specific
matters to
moment.
yeah. If you want to do it professionally or something, just try to do the best thing you can at the moment, and at least I feel like it's not replicatable, or you can't replicate it.
Yeah.
um sure, you will find some mistakes a year later when it comes to the mix and stuff like that, but at the same time, what happened is pretty unique. So um you know just try to do it as good as you can.
Sure. Let's talk about your unique experience though, because I think people can probably draw at least some lessons from it. Like, what was when did your music first start to get some attention, or when did you start approaching people saying like, hey, this is my music, I want to release it, or like what was that process like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was uh pretty much into making music since I was like 15 or 16.
Yeah,
Especially, the older I got and the more time I've spent into it, the more excited I was about it, even though the music wasn't that great. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I like annoyed people with my SoundCloud link. Maybe, probably.
we all have at one
Um,
point, I think.
yeah, yeah. But eventually, the "Want It All" track, which was my first real release, I sent it over to this label that I found through. Do you know Virtual Riot?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I used to watch like one of his streams. I mean, he was also like German, and I was into dubstep
Yeah,
back in the days. And yeah, someone asked if there's a cool label for beginners, and he said, yeah, like Audiophile Life, it was called at the time. And a couple years later, I had no idea like about labels and stuff, so I just followed his advice, and One It All got signed there and got into the like huge Spotify playlist a couple months later.
that's
And then
awesome.
Artifacts was the release after that, and it got into that playlist again. Um,
Yeah.
I did not know these guys before or anything. It felt very random. It still feels very random, to be honest.
Yeah. So would you say getting on that label and getting the songs on the Spotify like playlist, would you say that's not something you could have done on your own? Like it's really like you attribute it to getting to be a part of that beginning label and getting into that world, and they kind of pushed it in a way that kind of propelled it even further than you could have propelled it yourself.
Um, yeah, I guess for sure, because if you look at the individual releases of people, I was using DistroKid at the time.
Sure.
How many people are uploading tracks there each day?
Yeah.
Probably like
Millions.
thousand at
Yeah.
least, or 10,000. It's basically, you will completely fall under the radar in 99.9% of the cases.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, but if you are self-releasing, you have to kind of figure out your own strategy, I would say. There are people who are completely self-releasing and doing it professionally, but then they have some other aspect about their life or something that goes viral or something like
Yeah.
that. With a label, they already filter out probably 99% of submissions. So just as a SoundCloud or Spotify playlister, of course you're going to listen a little bit more to pre-filtered stuff than going through
Totally.
all the spam.
Yeah.
So in the end, no one really knows how Spotify works, I guess. Everyone's like
It's a bit of a mystery.
curious. Yeah.
It's a bit of a lottery too, especially for independent artists trying to submit and get on these playlists. But I cannot
Yeah.
imagine working at Spotify and like having to filter through all the like people submitting to these playlists. I would imagine that most of them like just don't get heard, and the advantage probably goes to folks that are on labels and that are connected. I'm sure the labels have connections and things like that. Um, I wonder like was there a moment when you got one of your tracks on those playlists where you're like, okay, this is the way to go? Because like nowadays, music industry, like we're not really selling albums. You know what I mean? Like we're not. You can't go. You can go to Target and buy a CD for sure, but it's mostly like major label artists. Like it's no longer like you can't really do that with independent artists anymore. So people listen all on streaming platforms now. And how do you get major plays on streaming platforms? playlists. Like, was there a moment where you kind of realized that, or did you already kind of know that going in, and once it happened, you were like, yes, it happened finally?
I no, I mean, I wasn't planning with that, of course. It's hard to explain because I find it weird myself that deep house is so big right now. I mean, there are bands and stuff, people who have practiced their instrument for their whole life, and then just a couple kids on their laptop make some tracks with a kick that's
Sure.
coming in exactly every 0.06 seconds throughout the whole track. Arguably a band and stuff like that have a lot more effort, paying recording studios and everything is live and stuff. So I mean, I'm very happy that people like my music and deep house, but I wouldn't say it's something that I anticipated.
Yeah,
Um, Also, you can look up the royalties. You need quite a bit of streams to
of
just make a
course.
little bit of money. So it's not enough to just make a little bit of streams. You kind of have to be one of the best people in your genre
Well, you have to
to
have 12
really
million
make it.
plays on a track.
Yeah, but I mean, one track, it's not like
Yeah, yeah.
you know, every track would be dope. Yes.
Yeah, but I guess the gateway in that strategy is like, okay, if 12 million people listen to one track, if even like 10% of those people go and check out your other music, it can be pretty good, like for building a fan base and things like that.
Yeah, but it's more like 1% max.
Sure.
But yeah,
That's a good reality
I mean,
check for especially for the folks listening. Like you can have like a big track blow up and like do you think about that? Like what work like are you just thinking about okay, I'm going to keep putting out music or do you think about things like building up your brand so that like more people, stay fans and don't just listen to the one track? Like is that stuff you think about?
um, I mean, I when I released Artifacts, I felt like it was a pretty weird track, to be honest.
That's funny.
I wasn't thinking, oh yeah, this is the track everyone's gonna love. So I kind of just try to keep making what I love making, and in fact, like this is what makes me happy. Just
Sure.
making music I love. So I think it kind of correlates because by doing that, it will also keep building up the whole thing, and people will keep checking it out. I hope, but it's true. You also have to kind of think a little bit more out of that little box of what you love doing. So, for example, I kind of have to post a little bit more to social media. I think
Right.
this I don't post a lot, but yeah, I'll have to step that post game up, and
Is that
it's
something
kind of
you like
hard during
dread?
Corona.
Yeah, it is hard during Corona, and also like a lot of people, it's just not for them. Like posting on social, like people just want to like make the art or make the music or whatever. But I would say building the brand is super helpful for sure. And what you talked about, I think, is important. Like with your, big track, like you could not have planned for it. You would never have expected. You didn't make it thinking like this is gonna be the big track. And I think a lot of people do think like that. Like a lot of people will make a track to be the big track. Oh, I'm gonna make this track like this, and this because this is what people really like, and this is what blows up. But it's like really impossible to plan for that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to believe in it.
You can
You know, you
believe in it, sure, but
you
not.
have to, like, with every track you release, of course, you have to believe that it is a great track,
Yeah,
and like believe that, you know, but not expect that it's gonna get, a lot of plays, I
yeah,
would say.
absolutely. A couple of questions from the chat. Asta asks about ultra beginner equipment. What was your initial setup like in terms of hardware, software? I mean, we kind of touched on it already, and you don't have that extensive of a setup now. But like, what was that very early setup? FL Studio on like a little Chromebook or something like that,
Chromebook, I don't think
I think
that's
about that like kids today, like all the kids have Chromebooks because of school. So I think about
yeah.
like, what are they gonna try
There
to
are
use?
online DAWs.
Yeah,
There are.
totally. Yeah. I'm wondering like who's the person I'm gonna interview in like 10 years that's like, yeah, I started on a Chromebook and I was using like BandLab or something like
Yeah, I'm
that.
using my Apple Watch
Yeah,
actually.
exactly. What was it a struggle like as a younger kid, like trying to make music? Because I remember my struggle being younger, like trying to use like the old Windows PC, trying to install some software that definitely couldn't run on it. You know what I mean? Like using a little microphone that attached to the back of the computer through like a 3.5 millimeter jack or something like that. Was there a young struggle for you back then trying to get the software and trying to get that all up and running?
Um, I mean it was, I mean, I was into gaming anyway, so I already
Uh,
had kind of a working PC. I mean, it was not the greatest PC, but FL Studio was running okay, and I had like some really bass heavy headphones, and I thought they were the best headphones at the time.
because they have the most bass. Everybody thinks that.
Yeah,
I think that's the
yeah,
whole thing with Beats by Dre. That's why people love them because they are, just have like super like bass.
yeah. I mean, really, I think it doesn't matter what setup you have, because it, you know, you will need quite a bit of time to get to a point where the setup actually matters. So,
Yeah,
just have fun and keep doing it, and eventually like upgrade it piece by piece where it makes sense. But just a laptop and some headphones are fine.
yeah. We keep coming
Yeah.
back to that. You keep coming back to like, okay, laptop and headphones. Like the gear doesn't matter. Gear doesn't matter. Why do you think people get caught up in this idea that they can just like they need to get gear, or they if they just get this piece of gear they can improve? Like, what do you think? Like,
Well,
what?
because all, pro artists are usually making pro records, and of course, if you have unlimited money, then you're going to get the best equipment,
Sure,
because why not? And then, as a beginner, you see everyone using the top gear, and you think you need that, but it's not really the gear. Sure, you won't be able to achieve the exact same result without that gear oftentimes. For example, like oftentimes like some, synth bass or synth preset needs a very specific plugin to get there. But you can also do a million other cool sounds with the free plugins that come with the DAW. So
sure. Yeah. Do you want to shout out any like free stuff that you find yourself using? Like it could be like free third party plugins, or like what do you use in Ableton that just comes stock? Like you want to shout some of that out because somebody actually did ask about like free synth slash plugins versus paid synth slash plugins. You want to talk a little bit about what you're using?
um so I used to use Sound One a lot, which isn't free, but I mean it's a plugin.
Yeah,
um I wouldn't say it's the best plugin, but it sure, is part of my sound, or
sure.
it used to be. I don't use it as much right now. Other than that, the Voxengo span visualizer is great and it's free. And yeah, all the Ableton plugins I use quite a bit. They're all cool, and I feel like they're better than random free plugins because they get updated, and they work without any errors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any major mixing plug, like are you using a lot of audio effects for mixing that are just stock Ableton, or are there any like key third party ones that you're using?
Yeah. I like to use the auto filter. I mean, you're using Ableton as well, probably, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. For EQing, I do like the Pro Q3 because you just have a better uh, you have a better user interface.
sure.
That's really cool. Yeah, but sure, it's always cool to get like some compressors or some stuff,
Yeah,
the Fab Filter compressors, but or the Pro MB is great too. Um, but at that point, it's like you can name a million different plugins. In the
absolutely.
end, none of them really make the song. They all just tidy it up a little bit.
Yeah, and that's an important stage. Um, because I scan through the chat, while we're having this chat, and everybody always wants to know about the gear, and the plugins, and what can I get, what can I get. Um, any way you can sort of help folks that are just starting out get into the mindset of just make stuff. And you touched on it a little bit, like embracing like imperfections, just getting the idea out there. The Bob Ross and the tree analogy I think is really important. But can you speak some words of motivation to our audience out there who's like struggling to like just get the stuff out there or have the confidence to put stuff out there?
I mean, I guess that's two different topics, having the confidence to put stuff out there and not worrying about gear.
Let's take them one by one.
Okay, so not worrying about gear, I would say every piano piece ever it's just a piano.
It's
And
just the piano.
there are piano pieces that are amazing, and there are piano pieces that are not amazing. So personally, my songs are pretty melodic, so sometimes I try to just lay them out on piano. I don't have a piano, but I just draw on the MIDI notes, so that
Sure.
is something worth trying. Just laying it out as a piano piece and see if it works. Um, and if it does work, then you don't need crazy sounds to make up for anything because you already have a good foundation. Um, yeah, so that's about gear and about getting stuff out there. It probably never was easier to just put stuff out, under an anonymous name,
Yeah,
and you don't have to tell anyone that you're doing it.
that's true. I wonder, because you mentioned the piano part, and I think that that's really interesting. Um, I wonder, do you separate the parts of your brain that are like the technical side that's going to do like the mixing and the sound design versus the musical side? Like, are you always starting with that musical side first and plotting out, like, is this actually a good melody? Like, do these chord progressions like have feeling? Like, is there a stage of your production where you're really, really focused on musical ideas and then a switch to when you're doing technical?
I mean, it always kind of switches to technical when it's at the very last stage
Yeah,
of getting it done. But in the process, I feel like, the thing that might be good at is having all of that, doing all of that as one person. Because I mean, I don't write piano pieces just pure as, you know, just like notes and sell
right.
them. Also, I don't mix for other people. So I think somewhere in between is really what matters, being able to, do the theoretical melody part, but also the sound design that works for it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
I wonder,
it's hard to separate those things sometimes.
it totally is. What you talked about having piano lessons when you were like super young, but any other music theory training that helped you out, or like where does your like how did you gain the knowledge to be able to write like beautiful melodies and moving chord progressions, things like that?
Um, yeah, I don't know, man.
Perfect answer. Thanks for watching, everybody. But I think
I
it's
mean,
important because, like, I went to school, like, I was in school band, then I went to school for music, took music theory classes, right? So that's super easy to say, yeah, take a music theory class. But I would say the most of what I learned about the music that I love is from like emulating it, covering it, like really like analyzing it, but not in a school like analytical way, really just paying attention to the music I'm listening to and being like, oh, I want to write a melody that's kind of like this. Well, what makes that melody like that? Oh, it goes up and then it goes down, or whatever it is. Like any like informal approach you had to really understanding some of those concepts and translating them into your music.
um, I mean, I kind of wish I would know music theory because it would mean that I could actually play live and, collaborate easier with people.
Sure.
Sometimes, I hang out with people and they can play the piano and it's great, and I can't really do that. But um, there are a lot of like life hack YouTube videos, how to make melodies. Like it's like I feel like you kind of have to make your brain work and try to understand it,
Yeah,
whether it's through like music theory college or self learning. But I mean, I'm not a music teacher, so
yeah,
uh, if I mean, I would say if you're struggling with it, if you're feeling like you're struggling with it, then it does make a lot of sense to get some lessons because there are always people saying music theory is bad because it makes you follow certain rules, but
right,
it's I wouldn't say it's like that. it's it's important to understand. Once you understand what's going on in some songs, then you can take like those little puzzle pieces and apply it to your own music
for sure.
without it being a copy.
Yeah. We'll take one more question from the chat. Red Syrup Music was asking about creative block. And do you ever experience creative block? Does it bring you any kind of anxiety? I mean, especially when you're trying to get music out and have releases. Like, does the pressure of being on a label, you know, for instance, like does that affect things? Like, how do you deal with creative block in general?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. Sometimes it's there. Sometimes you hit everything that you do. Uh, it is what it is. But I'm happy that, after a couple days or something, I always want to make new music and want to, it's something that matters to me. But it's true. Sometimes, for a couple days, everything sucks. I
Yeah.
like all the music is I can't hear it. Like just hearing a repetitive kick is just like super annoying. So um
So
you
what do you
just kind of
do
have
when
to.
that happens? Like, are you just embracing the fact that you know it'll be over in a couple days?
Yeah, and it also helps to have like another hobby.
Sure.
So
What are your other hobbies?
I started like running around Berlin a little bit
Really?
this year.
Exercise. You
Yeah.
lost me there. I can't. But that's great because everybody I know that runs or talks about running says it's like super freeing and clarifying and releases endorphins, which has to be a myth from all of my experience with running.
That's great. You can actually listen to music while you're running. And I'm not a good runner. I just really run sometimes, but it's nice.
Yeah, I guess whatever it is, that the having the alternative to making music, like because I guess we start like you talked about it too, like music started as just something that's fun, and then you know kind of progressed, and you became more like it became your profession, and but that can be a really weird thing because this thing you used to sit down and do for fun and you know as an outlet becomes sort of like work. So it is good to have other hobbies for sure. Um, yeah. You're a very chill guy. Like I can see like very very zen. I can see that you do the running. Do you think the running has affected the music at all? Like having the
No,
running
I've
habit?
just been running for like 1 or 2 months. I don't definitely.
If you've kept it up that long, it's a habit now, my friend. You're in on it. That's great. Um we're coming to an end here. Anything what do you want to shout out? What do you want to tell people to check out? Parting words of wisdom, all that good stuff.
I mean, let's all hope we can go back to having fun sometime this year, maybe.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll
But
be able to
yeah,
catch a Resident live show.
hopefully.
Yeah. Where do you want people to go follow you and check out your music and all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, follow me on Instagram, and I think everything is linked there somewhere.
Sure. Yeah.
It's yeah, resident.music.
Yeah, totally. So I've got links to Resident's SoundCloud, Instagram, and Spotify all in the description of the video. So make sure you check that out. Give them a follow, give them a listen, all that good stuff. It costs $0 to do all that. So let's support the artist for taking his time and being on the show today. While you're down in that description too, we've got a link to 343labs.com where you can, you know, consider taking some courses in electronic music, sound design and synthesis, Ableton Live, Logic. Both of those are for all levels, beginner, intermediate, advanced, et cetera, et cetera. And tune in to more 343 TV because we're every single day, Monday through Saturday. We've got another show. Tomorrow is really important because Beatport charting producer Lewis Beck is going to be taking us through common chord progressions and music theory hacks for music producers specifically. So tune into that show tomorrow. I'll be live again tonight at 7 p.m. Sampling some stuff and having some fun. So come hang out. But hey, Resident, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
We'll do this again sometime. I hope that you're right about coronavirus and that it will end and we'll be able to all go to the festival that you're headlining really, really soon.
I'll also have a cooler room next
Hey,
time.
no, it totally fits your minimal vibe. Before we sign off, though, can you show off what that is hanging off your mic stand? The little
Oh yeah,
character?
that used to be my favorite little thing when I was younger.
I love that. That's perfect. All right.
Yeah.
That's it for our show, folks. Thank you for watching and listening to TAETRO Talks. If you want to take these chats with you on the go, podcast feed, TAETRO Radio on your favorite podcast app. And this interview will be up soon, in a week or so. But yeah, thanks again, man. Let's say bye to everybody now. Peace out.
Bye.